You are watching a modern air combat environment tutorial video made on behalf of Battlespace simulations by Close Air Solutions. Here is a brief overview of what we will cover in this tutorial video. In the last tutorial, we learnt that platforms have two states, intent and delta. To recap, when a platform is intent, it will follow its route, which is usually defined by its waypoint path. We know if it is intent. By selecting the platform, we see a black line extending from the platform. If it is in delta, we see a white line extending from the platform and a small delta symbol in the bottom left-hand corner. We will now learn how to affect the platform using waypoints. To add waypoints for a platform, select the platform. We can do this by clicking on it or selecting from the list in the bottom status bar. Then you can use the Add Waypoint button in the Mission Builder ribbon to add waypoints after the last waypoint. Remember, the Add Waypoint button is a toggle type button and will remain selected, allowing you to add multiple waypoints until you either deselect it or use the right mouse click on the mission area to return to the default selection tool. There are other ways to add waypoints that we will cover later in this tutorial. Remember, you can reposition waypoints in the same way you can move platforms. Press and hold left control and use the left mouse button to pick the waypoint up and move it. Release the mouse button when you've placed it. Another way to quickly reposition your waypoints is to use the Racetrack Orbit tool. When you select this from the Entity Control menu, you left mouse click and drag on the mission area to place the waypoints. Please note, if your platform doesn't already have waypoints, it will not place any for you. The tool simply takes the existing waypoints and arranges them in a scalable ellipse pattern. So if your platform starts with a whole bunch of waypoints, this can be a very useful tool. If not, then you'll need to add some first and then use the tool. Each waypoint has its own set of properties that can be changed. We see the properties by first selecting the platform. We then look for its waypoints and right-click on one of them to bring up the Waypoint Properties window. At the top of the Waypoint Properties window is the status box, which will give you some quick information about the waypoint, including the waypoint number, altitude, and distance from the selected platform, and the expected arrival time. It also states what time any action might take place if we've selected one. More on this next. One last thing to note about waypoints is the behaviour when the platform reaches its final waypoint. The default behaviour for air platforms is to loop back to waypoint 1. For ground platforms, the default behaviour is to stop. We can change the defaults and we'll discuss this later. To steer to different waypoints in the route, you can use the Entity Control ribbon to cycle through the waypoints like this. Note that the button is black and momentary. Note that the waypoint that's being steered to is highlighted on the route. The other way to steer to different waypoints is to use the Platform Properties window. In the navigation section, there is a field that says Next Waypoint. You can either increment it up or down with the arrows, or you can type in the waypoint number that you wish to steer to. These functions will allow you to produce complex routes for vehicles and persons. Sometimes people get mixed up between route and leg values when it comes to waypoints. If you enter a leg altitude or speed, the platform will be at that altitude or speed on that leg. So for example, if we enter a leg altitude of 18,000 feet at waypoint 3, the aircraft will start a climb to 18,000 feet at waypoint 3. We can watch this by right-clicking on the platform itself to get the platform properties window up. We see in the status window at the top that the altitude is currently 10,000 feet. But if I cycle through its waypoints to waypoint 3, its altitude remains the same until it gets to waypoint 3. Then it will start a climb to 18,000 feet. It will remain there until waypoint 4, and then it commences its descent back to the altitude specified in the waypoint 4 leg altitude field. All altitudes can either be specified as above sea level or above ground level. The same behaviour is true of leg speeds. The aircraft will accelerate to the leg speed if I select a new leg speed at a waypoint. When the aircraft gets to that waypoint, it will accelerate to that leg speed. When it gets to the next waypoint, it will change back to whatever the leg speed is in that next waypoint. Now for route speeds and altitudes. If you set a route speed in a Waypoint Properties field, all the leg speeds after that waypoint, including the waypoint you're editing, will change to that value. For example, if I edit waypoint 2's route speed and change it to 200 knots and then hit enter, if we look at the speeds for all the waypoints that follow, they will have changed to 200. But note that waypoint 1 has remained at the original speed. To change the route speed for all of the platform waypoints, you either need to edit the route speed at waypoint 1, or you can edit the platform properties like this. Right-click on the platform to display the platform properties. Note, the platform properties window navigation section is broadly similar to the navigation section you saw in the waypoint properties. If you ever get confused, look to the very top of the window and you'll see that it says Platform Properties, followed by the call sign of the platform being edited. If you change the route altitude in the Platform Properties window, then all the waypoints will change. This is true also for speed. Likewise, the Platform Properties form also allows you to edit the leg speed and altitude. If you edit these, it will change the altitude or speed only for the current leg. And then when it hits its next waypoint, it will do what's contained in the properties for that waypoint. Note that changing the leg speed or altitude in the platform properties does not affect the value in the Waypoint Properties box. whereas changing the route speed or altitude does affect all the platform's waypoint properties. In the case of ground-borne platforms such as vehicles or humans, if you don't give that platform a speed in its platform properties before it gets to its next waypoint, it will never get there. All platforms have a default speed and altitude, and in the case of ground-based vehicles, their default intent is to face the next waypoint, and their default speed is usually 0. I need to give the platform a speed to get it to the waypoint, where it gets its next leg speed and altitude instructions. I do this in the Platform Properties window by typing in a leg speed. Remember, typing in a leg speed only affects the current leg the platform is on and will not change the leg speed properties in any of the waypoints. For ground-based platforms, it can be cumbersome to map out all the waypoints along a line feature such as a road or path. Handily, MACE allows you to create waypoint paths from vector files known as shape files. You can make your own shape files in MACE. This is covered in a later tutorial. For now, we'll import them. The easiest way to import a .shp shapefile is to just drag and drop it into the MACE mission area. It will show up as a line. The other way to import it is to use the Import button on the File menu. Navigate to the folder that contains the shapefile, click on it and press OK. You can attach your platform to a road by opening the Platform Properties window, and at the very bottom, in the Formation drop-down menu, select Attach. You will then be presented with a 4-way arrow. If you left-click that arrow on the road vector, you'll see a load of waypoints suddenly created. But you may not want to go to all of these waypoints. You may only want to go so far along the road before, say, turning onto another road. To do this, find the waypoint you wish to stop at and select it with the right mouse button to bring up the Waypoint Properties window. Then, at the bottom of the waypoint window in the Management section, you can click Delete All After. You can then repeat this process by attaching to the next road and deleting the surplus waypoints, and so on. Likewise, you have an option to delete all waypoints before a certain waypoint as well. If you need to add a waypoint in between waypoints, for example to make a turn smoother or to avoid an obstacle, select a waypoint, right-click to get the Waypoint Properties window, and then click Add Before or Add After. A cross will then appear, and you can add a single waypoint, before the mouse pointer then returns back to being the default selection tool. You can effect simple control of platforms with actions that are performed when the platforms reach the waypoint. For more advanced control, you should really be using the scripting functions of MACE, and this will be covered in a later tutorial. Waypoint Actions are selectable from the drop-down menu at the bottom of the Waypoint Properties form. You can add more than one action. They will appear in the Actions window and will be performed one after the other. I will not discuss what every action does here. That information is available in the MACE manual, and you can experiment with them for yourself. What I will do is pick some of the most commonly used actions and explain them. We will start with the stop, land and RTB actions. The stop action will set the platform speed to 0. That is all. This is useful if you want a platform, perhaps a person or a vehicle, to follow a route of waypoints and then stop. The land action only works for aircraft. It will command the aircraft to enter a landing cycle at that point, whether there is a landing zone set in the platform properties or not. The RTB action means return to base. This will instruct the platform to return to its landing zone, which is specified in the platform properties window. If you want to create a landing zone, then this is done in the Mission Builder ribbon. They are contained in the Sites section under Airfield Operations. Here's a tip. Name it something simple and copy that name straight into the platform landing zone field. Now, if we make a waypoint action RTB for this platform, we will see it go directly to the landing zone site and land. This is very useful for helicopter operations scenarios. Next, we will cover the loiter action. Loiter, for ground-based platforms, means they will just wait at that waypoint until the time you specify has elapsed, and then they will continue on following their specified leg parameters. Loiter for air platforms gives you the added element of a direction to turn, a turn radius or load factor, and if your platform is a helicopter, you can loiter in place, i.e. hover. So in this example, an aircraft will loiter for 10 seconds in an orbit and then return to the route. The reverse action simply reverses the order of the waypoints. This is a really useful tool for ground platforms, such as soldiers, that are patrolling up and down a route, where you don't want to put a whole load of waypoints down for their return route. As an aside, if you're placing waypoints down in MACE, like this, and you press Ctrl and then the W key on the keyboard, that will reverse the waypoints at your command. Most people put the reverse actions on the first and last waypoints of a route, so that the platform just keeps routing back and forth along the waypoint track. But to make this work, it is best to set the platform to steer initially to waypoint 2, so that it is not performing the reverse action right away. The final action I'd like to talk about is Proceed To. This allows you to skip waypoints in the waypoint sequence. Here is an example of why you might want to do this. Here is an attack helicopter that for tactical reasons wants to fly a racetrack that is orientated towards the target to fire long-range weapons, before then pressing into the target for closer range weapons like guns. If I give the helicopter an orbit using the Waypoint Orbit tool and extend out the legs like so, then, at the last but one waypoint, I add the action Proceed To and skip the target waypoint. The aircraft will never fly to the final waypoint. But when I want him to, I can manually command him to steer to that waypoint using either the Platform Properties form, or in the Entity Controls I can hit the Next Waypoint button until my desired waypoint is highlighted. That's all the waypoint actions I'm going to cover here. As I said, they're covered in the manual, and with a bit of experimentation you'll soon understand their utility. Here is the summary of what we covered in this tutorial video.